We are so excited to see how the challenges of this year have led to a bigger and broader Comic-Con experience, with guests and participants from all over. Today, we even had students from Canada in our afternoon workshops. Tonight, we have Brian Azzarello, who grew up in Cleveland Heights and now lives in Chicago, in conversation with John Suntrust, host of the Word Balloon podcast. Before I invite them to the stage, there are a few things I need to share with you. First of all, we want to thank all of our sponsors for supporting our work and the Kids Comic-Con. So a big thank you to Cuyahoga Arts and Culture, the Ohio Arts Council, Cleveland Public Library, Blick Art Materials, Max Bax Books on Coventry, Heights Libraries, the Tabor Family, Nancy Schwartz-Katz, Joni Berger, Andy Treras, Claire McBroom, and Stephen and Joan Werber. We also want to especially thank the Cleveland Public Library for hosting the event on this amazing virtual platform and for providing support throughout. And we want to thank Heights Library for providing sign interpreters tonight and tomorrow night, as well as at several sessions during the day tomorrow. I know you can't give them a round of applause, but please let them know you appreciate them by using their services and purchasing from their stores, some of which are in our virtual artist alley. Next, I want to thank all of our guest artists, volunteers and staff members, board members, Young Professionals Board, and supporters for their ongoing support during the last 10 years. We have just reached double digits as an organization, and we are excited to celebrate that with you. I also want to share with you our expectations for the Comic-Con from today through tomorrow and through tomorrow night. I'll read them to you now and put them in chat in a few minutes. Lake Erie Inc. strives to create a safe, welcoming environment for all youth. Our goal is to create an accepting, encouraging, and inclusive environment where you can be respected and celebrated for being yourself, regardless of age, race, ethnicity, gender, or sexual orientation or ability. We ask that everyone act in ways that support these goals while interacting in this great virtual space. With all that said, I would like to introduce John Suntrust. John is a 30-year Chicago broadcaster for CBS Radio. Since 2005, John has been the host of the Word Balloon podcast, the one-on-one interview podcast featuring the stars and creators of geek culture. John will introduce Brian Azzarello, who has been a frequent guest on his podcast, and then they'll talk together about Brian's career. After that, we invite you to use the chat to ask questions. Please welcome John Suntrust to the stage.
Cynthia, pleasure to see you, and everyone who's watching, thank you very much. It's an honor to have been asked to do this. I'm a big Cleveland fan, being from Chicago, and got to say I've always respected and appreciated the history of comic books in Cleveland as they've intertwined through the decades. Really excited about this conversation we're going to have today. One of Cleveland's favorite sons, and he's become one of Chicago's favorite sons. I've known him for 15 years and had great conversations about his career and his thoughts on pop culture. You might know him best from his work at DC Comics in particular, where he has done things like the Great Crime Series, his own 100 Bullets that managed to make 100 issues of this amazing crime story, and also his work on Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, really a lot of the great characters of the DC universe. But he also had a big hand in working at Marvel, and in particular, one of my favorite miniseries that he did was on Luke Cage, and it's a really great story if you want to dig back and see it. Also a great Hulk story called Banner. Everybody, please welcome Cleveland's own Brian Azzarello.
There I am.
How are you, man?
All right. I'm all right, John. How are you?
Doing all right. Doing good. I'm excited for us to talk and remind people of your long history, obviously starting in Cleveland. And I want to ask, you got to ask every comic book fan, do you remember your first comics that you were buying?
Yes, I do. Well, yeah, I do. I think I do.
What'd you read back then?
I loved monster comics. That's what I was into. I liked probably Swamp Thing #1 is comic I remember not being the first, but being the first that really affected me.
Cool. That's amazing. Len Wein and the great Bernie Wrightson.
Right. Yeah. Who I was lucky enough to meet and, become friends with.
Did you ever have a chance to collaborate with Bernie ever?
No, I did a little bit with Len.
Cool.
On the Before Watchmen stuff.
Oh, that's right. Yes, and that's another great set of characters that you had an opportunity to work on. In particular, the comedian and a great Rorschach story. Both of those incredible stories. So fans of Watchmen might find that stuff interesting as well. Where did you buy your comics back in the day in Cleveland?
Well, there were 3 drugstores because none of them carried everything. Me and a couple other kids, we would ride our bikes on, I think comics came out on Thursday then, or Tuesday. It doesn't even, who cares? But we would go that day. And see what they had. We'd buy what we liked. This is when nobody was buying the same books. Like you buy this, and then like you read it and you give it to you. We were passing them around, all that kind of stuff. So we would, we'd go to a different drugstore and see what was on the rack there. There was there was a store downtown Cleveland called Kay's Books. It was a used bookstore. It was on Prospect, very, very close to Public Square. It doesn't exist anymore. But that was a place where we would go. We would take the train down, the rapid transit, get off at Terminal Tower, then walk over to Kay's, and that was where you would buy cover. They were the comics that had the prices written in grease pencil on the. You go through the racks. And
That's awesome, man. Did you read too there were great oversized black and white comic books that were on the magazine rack, but still sold in the general place of comics. Things like Creepy and Erie, and those were great horror anthology comics back in the day.
Yeah, but those were, when I was a kid, those were kind of over my head.
Okay.
There wasn't a lot of monsters. That's what I wanted. I wanted monsters. I wanted the visuals. Sure. And also that period, I'm assuming, am I right? That's when Marvel was kind of reprinting a lot of their monster stuff that they were doing before their superhero line really started in the early 60s. So titles like Where Monsters Dwell comes to mind. Yeah, that's right. And I had no idea those were reprints.
Me too.
Thought all this stuff was new. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great, man. So am I right? Did you start in terms of it's so funny. Amy Rosenbluth says we all want monsters. Absolutely, man. And Cynthia also says monsters are the best. Absolutely, man. This is great. And everyone, I appreciate the chat. I'll be referring to questions and comments throughout the conversation. But we'll get some of Brian's early beginnings and stuff. But yeah, I'm so thrilled that everyone is encouraged to participate in this conversation. We really want to know what you think and the questions you might have for Brian as well. So, Brian, did you start wanting to be an artist when it came? Like, when did comics occur to you as a potential career? And maybe I'm getting the order out of sequence. But yeah, tell me what led you to be part of the comic book world.
Well, I guess I went to the Cleveland Institute of Art. That's where I graduated from. So I used to hang out at Coventry. That's Coventry that's where the school that this convention was located. Now it's on the internet, but like right across the street, kitty corner, was a place called Arabica that I would hang out in, and that's where I met Harvey Picar, who was like, any curmudgeonly skills I have, I learned from Harvey. Right? But I went to art school. One of the things that happened in art school almost immediately was, if I had any intention of doing comic art, they beat that out of me.
Because it was so lowly regarded as far as an art form, as far as school went.
Yeah, and plus it was like more of a fine arts kind of school. So, and I think that, now I'm the opportunity to go to the Kubert school that didn't exist when I was coming up. I might have done that, but I didn't. So I got into fine arts pretty deep. Was showing around in galleries in Cleveland, then moved to Chicago, and classic starving artist, that had a day job, came home, had ramen just like I was doing in college, and then started painting.
Okay.
And the opportunity arose for me to write some scripts for a local comic company, and I jumped on it.
That company was Kamiko, am I right?
The North Star.
Oh, excuse me. Okay. And what kind of stories were you writing back then?
Horror stories. Those monster stories.
That's great.
Yeah.
Were there any collaborators that you were working with, artists that were others that became bigger names in comics beyond North Star? Do you remember some of your people back?
Kyle Holtz. Kyle Holtz was the first person I worked with.
That's great.
Yeah.
Fantastic artist, absolutely. Still very active today.
I think he lives in Dayton. I think he lives in Ohio. So
okay. Did you know growing up in Cleveland about like Siegel and Schuster coming from Cleveland and some of the other and like you mentioned Harvey, obviously, but some of the other even mainstream people that were working in comics back then? Who were some of the other names that you were aware of as a kid that were comic book?
Well, like Val Mayrick was from there.
Sure.
I think Tom Batik was from there.
Okay.
Who did Ziggy? He was from Cleveland.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that. Val, of course, big Marvel guy. Was it Howard the Duck, I want to say, among or maybe I'm misremembering. Kazar. Wow. That's fantastic. Great Savage Land kind of Tarzan character that was a Marvel original, even going back to pre-comic books, the pulps. Kazar was like a Tarzan knockoff from the 30s. So pretty cool.
Yeah, Kazar was a Tarzan knockoff, except he was with dinosaurs. I mean, let's take Tarzan and turn him to 11.
Absolutely. No, I'm and great comic book people have had their opportunities writing and drawing. Kazar,
instead of having a chimpanzee as a sidekick, he had a saber-toothed tiger.
You are not wrong. Absolutely. So from North Star, Kamiko, a little bit of a bigger company. 80s and 90s, as I remember, and they had some interesting licenses back then. That kind of
I wasn't working for them until the 90s.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then
late, like mid 90s.
Oh, really? That far? Okay. So.
Oh yeah, I didn't start working in comics probably till it was not in the 80s at all.
Okay. Yeah. Well, what? Like, were there significant Kamiko comics that you worked on, or what? Tell us.
No, not really.
No.
I was a bit of a jack of all trades at that point.
What other jobs were you doing other than writing for?
But then that's where I met Tony Daniels, who's like gone on to big things.
Great artist.
Yeah,
absolutely, and writer for that matter, based in Chicago. Absolutely. And Diana Schutz, am I right? Wasn't she a Kamiko or?
Not when I was there.
Oh, okay.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. That was when it was in Philly.
I see. Oh,
it had transferred by then.
Okay. And then also, it's as Cynthia says, I think it's interesting that Brian moved from painting to writing. I wonder what that felt like. Yeah, what was that transition like?
It was easy. I mean, it's like it's a creative itch. That's all. As long as it gets scratched.
Okay, that's cool. Were your stories 10-page stories, 20-page stories, 5-page stories? What were the lengths back then?
Yeah, they were shorter ones.
Short?
There was black and white anthology kind of stuff.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. And then you got the opportunity to work at DC. And tell us about breaking into one of the two big companies back then.
Man, it wasn't easy. It was difficult at that time. There weren't. I mean, there weren't a lot of avenues for new creators to get in at the time, especially doing what I wanted to do. I wasn't really. I wasn't well versed on continuity very much, So it's like, who do I know? I know Batman. Maybe I can write a Batman story. It's like, what's your name? Even if I have to ask you what's your name, means you're not writing a Batman story.
Yeah, because he was one of the elite. It still is the lead character, the most popular character, and to trust a newcomer to a Batman story was probably unlikely back then. Yeah, absolutely. Jay wanted to know regarding your art. In your paintings, were your subjects horror or monster themed paintings?
Some people might say so.
What were they?
They were figurative, and there was a lot of gore. Yes, there were a lot of missing limbs, but it was mostly about color.
Okay.
So was that?
Yeah, no, I think that answers the question. Absolutely. Dason Santana wants to know, how do people publish books? And I think that's a great question. And it's really, the industry has certainly changed since when Brian broke into the business and stuff. So, if feel free to talk about the way it is now in terms of publishing books and stuff.
Well, it's not how, it's why. That's the real question. I mean, listen, there are so many avenues right now as far as publishing goes. Self-publishing is something that exists that really didn't before. Being able to create digitally has really, really revolutionized publishing, I think.
Agreed.
There's a lot of published to order avenues right now. There's a lot of things that are just specifically being published on the Kindle.
You're right about that. Absolutely. And even prior to the idea of publishing comics, so many creators who are making it today just started putting their stuff online and having a web comic and web comics and building an audience. Johnny Appleseed, one at a time, one reader at a time. And again,
that was not an avenue that I had. I mean, this didn't exist.
Understood. Yeah. And that's a great thing is now it is easier to self-publish with crowdfunding and just, again, getting an initial awareness through a webcomic. And I know Brian and I both know even creators here in Chicago that have succeeded without having to go to DC or Marvel or any of the other bigger publishers to get their work seen and create a paying audience. So it's kind of great. Yeah. And really just believe in what you're doing. Get your, as Malcolm Gladwell, the great sociologist says, get your 10,000 hours or your 1,000 drawings in to just keep working at it and getting better and stuff and believe in yourself.
Yeah.
And,
forget what the word no means.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's funny. Before his Coming to America movie, Eddie Murphy a couple of years ago did this movie called Dolomite is My Name. And it's about this comedian, Rudy Ray Moore, from the 60s and 70s, who didn't have a lot of talent, but wouldn't take no for an answer and managed to make a half a dozen films and a lot of comedy albums and was not the funniest guy in the comedy clubs, but he just believed in himself. And everyone might know the movie Ed Wood from years ago. He was another guy like that. It's just, you gotta, especially now when you can make this stuff on your own. Again, like Brian said, satisfy that creative itch, and really and make your stuff, and you'll be surprised. And also, no matter what, at least you tried, because the worst thing in the world is to have regrets about what you might have done if you had spent the time working on that stuff. So, and I even say that as a broadcaster who's worked in broadcasting with companies like ESPN and CBS over my radio career. And I started this podcast 15 years ago, and I'm having the time of my life doing this as opposed to working in some broadcasting job. So Don't listen to no.
No, look, success is 4% talent and 96% discipline.
Agreed. Absolutely. Cynthia asks, who are some of the up-and-coming creators that teens and others might be interested in reading? That's really a question for all of you watching right now. But God, the great thing is, I think, between the traditional Marvel and DC output, but also creators like Renee Talgemeyer and some others that came in through children's books and YA books, it's really an exciting time, I think, where creators are using the format of comics, words and pictures, to do a lot of interesting things and finding a new audience that maybe isn't walking in the door looking for a Superman or a Batman or Wonder Woman story.
Yeah, I think Boom Studios is doing a lot of really, really great stuff right now. They put out a graphic novel version of Kurt Vonnegut's the Slaughterhouse-Five last year. That was fantastic.
Yeah. And these other publishers are really seeking out other genres. And it's so weird that it seems like there were always occasional books here and there that weren't superhero books. I mean, my God, you mentioned horror. The amount of horror comics out there is incredible, but really literally every genre. And also the influx of the Japanese material, manga, that has come through and really just created this other audience that are reading the same format of a book in terms of words and pictures, but are getting a completely different reading experience than traditional superhero stories. And that's incredibly great. It really is. All of us that observe and participate in comics, we're saying we're in a second golden age, and I completely agree with that observation.
Well, I think that the more examples there are of different types of stories being told, lets readers know and aspiring artists know that there is an audience for this. Like, oh, I can tell my story in this particular format,
Absolutely.
I mean, like all the superhero stuff's going to the movies and TV anyway. It's like, take advantage.
Were you a superhero cartoon watcher before getting in the comic book business?
I like the Fantastic Four, but that long time.
The Hanna-Barbera cartoon?
Was it Hanna-Barbera?
Yeah, from the 60s, the one from the 60s or whatever?
Yeah.
No.
I like the Fantastic Four because the thing looked like a monster. I mean, getting back to monsters.
Well, I remember they were in reruns in the 70s, but there was a series called The Marvel Superheroes where they actually took panels from the comic book pages and slightly animated them, but they had great audio casts and they were like limited animation cartoons, but there was the Hulk smashing through a wall.
We didn't have those in Cleveland. No. We had Spider-Man, and Spider-Man there were two different styles of the Spider-Man cartoon. There was the one that was like two stories in one episode. And then there was the stuff that was like it looked nothing like the comic books. It was dark and gritty. And that's the stuff I gravitated towards. It was like, this is like really cool. And it was a lot of like what we would consider flash animation, I think.
Ralph Bashki.
It was just like,
yeah, he did that season of Spider-Man that you're discussing. Absolutely. And again, in the chat for some great horror recommendations, Gary suggests Ice Cream Man, great horror anthology. And another great book, and I believe this is a Boom book, Something is Killing the Children.
Yeah, that's James.
Yep. Yeah. And James right now, isn't it interesting? James, great horror writer, also doing an amazing job currently on Batman. I think really both, actually all the heroes right now at DC, they've just gone over a creative change, moving into a new phase. And I think Batman's in good hands, Wonder Woman is in good hands, and I think the same thing of Superman as well. So it's a cool time. And of course, you've had the experience of writing all three of those.
Yes, I've written all three.
I'm going to get into Batman and that stuff in a second, but your breakthrough was one of my favorite things you did at another DC imprint. It was called Vertigo, but Johnny Double.
That's a crime story.
Yes. And did you do stuff at DC before Johnny Double?
I did some anthology stuff, a few stories, 10-page stories in there, or 8 pages.
And were those for horror or war or Western or?
Yes. Yeah, whatever the anthologies were.
That's cool. That's great. But yeah, Johnny Double, I remember that was a great crime story, and almost in a way a dress rehearsal for 100 Bullets.
That was our audition. Yeah. That's
cool. Describe 100 Bullets for people who don't know. I mean, it's such a great urban, and it goes in a lot of directions, but it's just you and Eduardo.
It goes in many directions. Yeah. 100 Bullets is the best way to describe it is to put you in the position. Like you're on a bus, a man sits down next to you. He's got a briefcase. He hands you the briefcase. You open it up. Inside the briefcase is a gun and 100 rounds of ammunition and picture and proof of the person that ruined your life. You can use the gun and the ammunition to do whatever you want. And then he leaves. You have carte blanche. If you use it, there's no law enforcement that will prosecute you. So it's a morality stories. You know.
Very groundbreaking series. Started just over 20 years ago, and Brian and Eduardo Rizzo, the two creators that came up with the concept and stuff, and Dave Johnson, the wonderful cover artist. It's pretty amazing. It really is a great series. It's a little adult, so for the smaller kids that might be watching, that might be.
You'll love it.
Well, and truthfully, going to Batman, you've had the opportunity to write a lot of different Batman stories in a lot of different formats, and not only for comics but also for animation as well. And there's a great DVD that came out during the Nolan films called Gotham Knight, and it's a collection of short animated stories. And Brian did one of those, and they're great because they're all in different animation styles, and they're all
Japanese though. They're all Japanese animation houses,
and they're incredible. Yeah. And that was an amazing, really tough Batman story where he's kind of trapped in a sewer, and very psychological story, I think, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I think Batman lends himself to psychological stories.
We should talk about that because also, again, you wrote Batman and Superman, and they really do represent the light and the dark of the DC universe. But how do you approach Batman? There's an essay question.
Yeah, how do you approach Batman? Very quietly.
I don't mean physically.
I guess like if I think about the character and it's like, do I have anything new to say about the character that someone hasn't said? Or something like I have an idea right now that I'm going to be talking to DC about Batman that is like a new sort of like, oh, that's like no one's addressed this, and that's something, that's what interests me. If I could say, no one's addressed that. There's plenty of stories that have been written and they're still there, and I don't want to write something someone else.
Understood. And have there been heroes that they asked you to write that you felt I don't really have anything to say about this character in particular?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
I don't know if you want to spill who or... Okay.
No.
I understand. I'm going to go back to questions from the audience. They're asking great questions. What comic characters do you relate to the most? Dylan asked that question.
Who do I relate to the most as a character? The villains. I understand their motivation. And plus, I think that the villains are the ones that get the stories rolling. You know, they're at the center of the stories. What's Star Wars without Darth Vader?
Do you think too that I mean, it's just as a fan observing, I think the best villain stories are the ones where clearly the villain thinks he's the hero of his own story, and you know.
Well, that's and that should be every villain story. You know.
Yeah, I think the way Smallville 20 years ago portrayed the Lex Luthor story, a character that you're very familiar with as well. I just think, you know, again, just the tragedy of this guy trying to do good his own way. That version of Luthor. Compare that to your. You did a great miniseries with Lee Bermejo, Lex Luthor, Man of Steel, right? Am I right? Wasn't it called Man of Steel or something? Or
yeah. It was called Man of Steel. Now I think it's just called Luthor. They took the Man
right.
of Steel off.
But yeah, tell us about your take on Luthor versus, say, like the Smallville version.
Well, that was where when Lee and we approached that story as like Luthor believes he's right, that he believes Superman is an alien and Superman is a threat, and Superman is limiting to humanity because we can't be Superman. So we start to rely on him. There were a bit of, there were some religious allegories to it as well. But it was like Luthor was like a humanist, complete humanist. And he also, by the end of the story, you realize he's amoral and the end justifies the means, and he's not a good person.
There's a great chapter in that story, and one of the selling points to me, and it's a great individual issue, but you can get the whole story now. It's collected. And like you said, it's called Luthor. But he has a lunch with Bruce Wayne. And he's talking to Bruce Wayne. He doesn't know he's talking to Batman, or at least my perception of it was that he's just talking to another industrialist who he's hoping to convince maybe to think along his lines.
Yeah.
And the whole time, obviously, it's Bruce Wayne. So it's like Batman is having his own personal surveillance and is going to be able to get that much closer to Luthor in his mask. So it's a tremendous idea for a comic story.
Well, that was just like, that was something that dawned on me, that like those guys would run in the same circle. You know, it's like it's Elon Musk and Bill Gates sitting down and having, meeting for lunch. They have more in common than Batman and Superman do.
It was great, man. Well, and I know they relabeled the Luthor story because you did another series with Lee, or I should say a graphic novel that was called Joker.
No, John. They relabeled because Zack Snyder did Man of Steel.
Oh, because I assumed, and actually, of course, you did other collaborations with Lee before these stories in the Wildstorm imprint. I know with Death Blow.
Yeah.
But the Joker story, and also coming now, you did this 10 years before the movie came out. The recent Joker movie, at least 10 years, around 10 years.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, there you go. And it's, man, I'll tell you, for people who really got a lot out of the Joker movie and are looking for more stories in those vein, I think the thing you did with Lee is a great example of that. Now, as we describe the personality of Luthor, I mean, yeah, how do you define Joker's personality?
You don't. You stay away from it. You would be, and this is just coming from strictly structurally as a writer, you would be taking away power in your own story and power from the character that is, supposed to be 100% unpredictable. If you start explaining things, he becomes predictable. So stay out of his head. Just let that head happen. Where like Luthor was told in first person, Joker is told from the story's told from one of his associates.
That's awesome. Yeah. No, it's terrific. And then there's a different kind of psychopath, for lack of a better description, and that's Rorschach. And that miniseries that you did kind of this incredible grindhouse sort of story that's set before the events of the original Watchmen series. And it's kind of Rorschach when he was active and out there punching people. And I mean, it's, again, you might see similarities to Batman. You might see similarities to Joker. But again, a very individual character with a very tortured past leading into a different life as an adult.
Yeah. I mean, I just played with, I looked at the original story and the original character, what Alan Moore had done. And it's like, well, let's keep him. Let's not change him. Let's look at, because I think there was, to me anyway, a lot of Alan Moore's influences were obvious. Where Rorschach came from as a character. So I said to myself, like, I'm just going to use his influences too.
Okay. Odd Perry Richardson makes an interesting observation. And he said, this is ages ago, but the Hellblazer issues that you wrote depicting John Constantine's bisexuality drew some controversy. Do you remember your thoughts or reaction to that response?
My thoughts to controversy they haven't changed. Good. That is my thoughts. Good. It gets people, if it riles them up and gets them thinking and talking about something, I think that's good. That means I'm doing my
provoking
job.
A response, provocative writing.
Yeah. But not like, I mean, it wasn't graphic, and it wasn't it wasn't done like as, for shock value. There was actually emotions and reasons behind it. But because it was bisexual, people were,
Yeah. No, I'm really, Perry, I'm really glad you brought up Hellblazer, because Brian, I think writing John Constantine is another not easy task, and it's easy to fall into predictability. And Brian, I'm saying this, Brian's run on Hellblazer was exceptional. There's a lot of great stories in there, and you're surrounded by a lot of great other writers and stuff. But yeah, I know your Hellblazer run was very, very popular, and rightfully so.
Funny enough, after I'm talking about monsters and all that stuff, when I decided to do Hellblazer, I wanted to take all the monsters and the demons out of the book. I thought, like, what's the worst kind of monsters? Humans are the worst kind of monsters.
I love that, man. I always love that attitude when it shows up in horror by other writers as well. And yeah, I mean, again, Constantine was kind of a demon hunter, obviously, and introduced in Swamp Thing, and has really become his own character. And yeah, I think that's cool. I think that's great, man. I'm looking at other questions. All right, let's talk about Superman for a moment, because again, there's another character that you've had the opportunity to write. And it's interesting because I think some writers, when approached on would you want to write a Superman story, they've told me, I don't know how to handle it because he's so good and he's so virtuous, and immediately because of his powers, seemingly can solve any problem. What's your feeling on Superman?
We got a lot of blowback on what we did for Superman back then. And then they just printed the 15th anniversary of the first, of the trade. So it's that story, while it was Superman making a mistake and then trying to fix his mistake, again, it was more of it wasn't such a bright story as far as like light. It was a little bit darker. It was more introspective, but it's lasted,
That's great, man. No, I think you ask a lot of questions, and Superman is always searching for his humanity, not realizing, I think, that he, is as human as can be. And I really appreciated in For Tomorrow, in fact, when he would have the conversations with the priest and kind of searching for big answers, big humanity answers.
Well, I think Superman is, he's a Pinocchio character,
Wants to be a real boy.
Not the not the lying part, but he wants to be a real boy.
Amy has Amy is asking a question from Hadith, I guess, or Hadithi, excuse me. Huge fan of 100 Billets. Hope one day reading additional spin-offs. Imagine a Minuteman prequel series featuring a young Agent Graves and Mr. Hughes, or a story about Megan Dietrich's tale in The Trust. Ooh, good suggestions, bro.
A young Graves and Hughes and Shepard that'd be an interesting story.
Yeah, no, I like that. Really, the mythology. I mean, that's the great thing is we described 100 Bullets. We really talked about the individual story arcs and how each person would deal with the idea of getting this gun and these untraceable bullets and what they would do. But also alongside of that, the mythology of Agent Graves, the deliverer of the weapon and the bullets, but also the trust and everything else that was involved. Yeah, it's, I mean, really, you can't go wrong with the 100 issues of 100 Bullets. That's all I know.
There's a lot of conspiracy theories in 100 Bullets, and that's very popular right now.
Sadly true. Absolutely, man. That's fantastic. What else have we got here? There's really, folks, I think you're asking wonderful questions. How about doing, people wanted to know where you get, Macario Perkins asks, where do you get the majority of your inspiration from?
Newspapers. Always newspapers. Reality. That's because things happen in real life that I could never dream up.
Understood. Yeah. Cynthia says, we have a lot of young artists in the audience. What advice would you give them on finding or developing a good story?
Well, that's going to be the topic of my workshop.
Okay,
tomorrow.
Great. We'll get into that. And I assume as well, because the follow-up to that was you'll be describing your writing process, I would imagine. Cool. That's cool. What time is that tomorrow?
I believe it's 11.
Yeah, we're in Central Time, so sometimes we might be wrong about an hour or whatever.
Oh, yeah. Thanks for reminding me. Thanks. I think I'll be there.
That's good.
Check the road.
That's great, man. And I'm glad you're doing that. And yeah, I think it's, again, may you live in interesting times is the proverb, of course. And sadly, we are. To say the least. Absolutely. Wonder Woman was an opportunity to work in Greek mythology along with the superhero story. And tell us about your take on Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman, again, I approached that from trying to tell more of a horror story than a superhero story. I wanted to dig deeper into her heritage as far as the Greek gods go. If you read, a lot of the stories of the gods were not good people. They were, there wasn't it's not this is the good God and this is the devil. It's no, they were I am more powerful than you, and I can do whatever the hell I want. And don't judge me. I'm a god. Okay, you're just a person. So it was kind of bringing this sort of crazy crime family into her, in creating a sort of a new world for her to interact in.
Sarah wants to know what you comic books, do you currently read comics? And if so, what are you reading now?
What did I read today? I didn't read any comics today. What's the last thing I read? I read, it was a book by Ed Brubaker called Pulp. It's a sort of a Western kind of.
Great book. Fantastic book. And also mentioning Pulp, I think of your own Western that you did, Loveless, another great series. Have they collected Loveless? Okay.
Yeah, it's been collected. That's actually been an option. Maybe
It would make an amazing Western story, very much in the vein of Deadwood and some of these other great modern Westerns of the last 20 years or so. Yeah, really, you've always managed to find great collaborators, and truly Eduardo Risso, wonderful South American cartoonist. Brazil, am I right? Brazil? Argentina, pardon me.
Argentina.
But truly, yeah, these the collaborations in particular with Eduardo on 100 Bullets and Spaceman. He didn't do Loveless. I forget who did Loveless.
No, that was Marcelo.
Excellent.
Another
and a great artist at that and everything. But yeah, it always just seems like you and Eduardo have always got things cooking and stuff, and that's just such a great collaboration. We're always excited when you guys get back together to do something new.
I think it's the longest relationship I've had in my life. It's with Eduardo. I mean, we've been working together since '98. So.
All right. Dylan asks, what do you think of anti-heroes?
I like them. I mean, I like as long as they don't get away with everything. I mean, they need a bit of torture to themselves. Like a lot of the anti-heroes, I think when they work well, they know they're doing something wrong.
Okay. All right. And Cynthia is wondering if you could talk a bit about how the collaborative process works for you. So yeah, communicating with your artist. Again, I don't want to dip into too much of what you're going to cover in your workshop tomorrow, but whatever you can say about how the relationship, because truly it is, I mean, on the surface, it's written by and it's drawn by, and people may not realize how collaborative it can be and should be.
Oh yeah, it's much, yeah. We talk about things before I even get started. You know, like Eduardo and I, we're finishing up a story right now, and we're already talking about, like, well, what do you know? I said, like, what do you want to do next? And Eduardo said, like, I don't want to do any noir anymore for a while. Like, okay. It's like, well, how about a Western? He's like, yes, because like Western, there's sun to me. I mean, that's the opposite of. So that it looks like we're going to do something like that. But it's like we talk about it, and then, you know, I'll go back at him with like a few little snippets of what I want to do. He comes back at me, and then like I'll like write an outline for a story, and then send it to him and say, like, what do you think of this? And then he'll come back and it's like, I want, you know, can we go in this direction? This is the way I'm kind of envisioning it. So it's very collaborative. You know, there are people in this business that do treat artists like a pair of hands. I'm not that person. You know, if they think they can do, if they think they can draw something better than the way I'm describing it, please do. Please.
That's great. Well, and again, I would imagine with your art training, it might be easier for you to communicate with an artist in terms of, you know, what you're looking for, but also leaving things open for them for their own interpretations, obviously.
Oh, totally. I got to leave. I mean, I'm like, my scripts are notorious for being so under art directed. But I think that's one of the reasons why I get to work with some of the best artists in the business, because I trust them.
I'm glad you guys are doing a Western, and I always find it interesting that Westerns are United States folklore in a lot of ways. And it's always interesting to see how people of other countries interpret the American. And I say American because, of course, you know, Argentina is obviously South American, but there is just this different opinion. Like the Italians make incredible Westerns at times, and really around the world.
Oh, yeah.
Just the interpretation of the Western genre. And I don't know, in your art, like with these artists of other countries, have they opened your perspective on a Western and shared things that you wouldn't have thought of?
In some respects, sure. I think, look, Westerns don't sell.
I understand.
Listen, kids. Listen, kids, don't do Westerns.
But if you believe in it, I mean, you're right. It's,
But one of the things is like, okay, we do a Western. We can sell it in France, or we could sell it in Italy. It'll get translated, and we'll because it's not going to sell here doesn't mean it's not going to sell somewhere.
Understood.
Else.
Yeah. No, I get it. And it is interesting how well, and like what you're almost alluding to in a different way is that the superhero is so an American product, and it really doesn't sell well in the European countries and things. They want the other genres. They would much rather read those genres.
Yeah, I mean, worldwide, probably 100 Bullets and Joker are the two things that have been translated the most for me.
And really, Joker. Yeah. I mean, is Batman even in your Joker graphic novel? Okay, because I mean, it really is a crime. It's another crime story. More so, it really is about Joker and his crew and everything. Laura wants to know what's the best thing about working as a comic book writer, and what's the worst thing.
They're both the same thing. It's working alone in a room.
Yeah,
that's being a freelancer.
It's got to feel great, and I know this as a writer who's covered sports in a writing way. Seeing your book come out and the finished product, or even stumbling into a comic shop or whatever, and just seeing your stuff on the wall, like that had to be a great thrill, especially at the beginning of your career.
Oh, it was at the beginning of my career. Now I'm so jaded.
But I know, and again, Brian, because of your body of work and everything, and again, this is my perception. Correct me if I'm wrong, but is it easier to write other genres based on the fact that you've got this mountain of books that you've written over the years? Is it an easier sell to a publisher, or again, would you consider at this point in your career, if there's a story you really want to tell and nobody wants to do it, you've got a big enough audience that I would imagine if you wanted to take it from a direct crowdfunding standpoint to put it out, would you, is it easier to tell the stories you want to tell at this point in your career? Okay.
It's still pretty easy. Yeah. I'm not sure about the crowdfunding. I don't know if I have I don't know if I have that bone.
It absolutely is. Yeah, beyond the actual product itself. No, you're doing everything. Yeah. You're gathering the audience. You're in a lot of cases, people we know, other great comic creators like Jimmy Palmiotti, who really has it down to a science.
Jimmy loves it. Yeah, he loves it. And like he swears by that stuff, and he's talked. I've talked to him about it. But like, I like what I like to do is sit in a room by myself and write a story. When I'm done, I just want to write the next one. That's part of the best thing. The worst thing is like I'm in my room by myself for how many hours every week. It's like
when you're near the end of a story, are you already like, God, let me finish this thing and get on to the next thing? Or, can you see it to the end and be satisfied, add up to the last page?
No, I'm totally into it to the end. I got to stick that landing. No, I'm not moving on to the next.
Do you ever do things concurrently? Like, Bendis, a good friend of ours. I mean, he's always like working on 3 or 4. Absolutely, another guy from Cleveland. I'm glad you point that out. Yeah, he's working on 3 or 4 different things at once a lot of times, which I find amazing to be able to do that. So yeah. Is that good? I mean, I can also appreciate then you don't get bored having to just work on that one thing.
It's good and bad. You know, it's just the way it's reality. That's all. If I have 2 books going at once, I need to juggle. You know, I don't have the luxury of saying like, well, I'll get to this one and just work this one straight through. It's like, no, because I'm keeping the way I look at it myself. It's like it's not 2 books, it's 2 teams. It's like if I concentrate on one book, I'm letting the other team down. They need to work. You know, so if I'm not making script, the artist isn't drawing.
Colin wants to know if you have a favorite superhero.
No,
okay, no problem. And then Cynthia wants to know, because you love writing villains and you've seen a lot of, she has seen a lot of villain stories written by kids. What advice do you have for kids who like to write from the villain point of view so that the characters can come off the page? That's a great question, Cynthia.
You make that villain so villainous. Or okay. A villain needs to be compelling. You can have a story where, I mean, if the villain is not compelling and interesting, it's just not going to work. You can, I mean, like 100 Bullets is full of characters you could say, you know, they're bad guys. They're not good people. But what I did was I tried to make them the most interesting characters possible. That's how an anti-hero works too, by the way. You know, you got to give him like a real hook that makes him interesting, that people want to know about, like more about what's going on in his head.
Excellent.
So it's make them, they don't have to be likable, but they have to be interesting.
Hadithi has another question. Is David Goodis, we're getting more questions, which is awesome. I have to go back to it. Is David Goodis the biggest influence on your dialogue? Your characters speak in such interesting ways, and I wonder if the rhythm is derived from Goodis.
I don't know if it is. It probably is. I mean, he's like one of my favorite authors. And you know, his noir books those are the ones I probably like the best, because they get so existential. And, you know, I went to art school, so
I know you're a big George Pelecanos person as well.
I am a big George Pelecanos.
Absolutely.
Person,
yeah. And Hadithi also wants to know if you have plans. Oh, excuse me.
Wait. I would say that I'm more influenced by probably Ernest Hemingway
Interesting.
than I am from David Goodis, I think. Just because of the economy. Word balloons are this big, you know, and the more that are on a page, the harder it is.
You know, I'm really glad you made that point. I'm sure you're going to make it tomorrow in your seminar as well. Yeah, because you got to, sometimes you really have, and actually all the time, if the story can be conveyed by the art, you really want to let the art breathe.
No, show, don't tell.
That's great, man.
Yes. So it's like really, really stay out of the way of your artist.
And then in contrast, Hadithi also asks, any plans to write more animation?
You know, I was thinking about that, but that's as far as it got. So there's not any plans. I was like, I should call somebody about doing some more animation. Maybe.
Okay. Are there superhero stories in your near future, or are you pretty much working in the other genres?
There's some superhero stuff. I don't want to say it's superhero stuff, but it's stuff for DC that I can't talk about.
Understood.
Right
but
now.
yeah, I was wondering if it's in the DC universe, like their regular universe or whatever. Okay.
It's their
that's cool.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Is and that's what I was about to ask, because again, you're a Vertigo vet. They have kind of phased out Vertigo, or I don't even know what the status of, if there are Vertigo projects still to come. But Black Label,
they relabeled.
Well, that's what I was going to say. So, do you feel there's no difference in terms of what is now called DC Black Label, which for people watching that don't know is their adult line of books. You've already written a Batman story in that world, but yeah, is there a big difference for the rules of writing Vertigo versus Black Label?
I think that I think there's more of an emphasis on telling stories using DC characters than doing like 100
Understood.
bullets,
Absolutely. By the way, everybody, it's tomorrow from 11:15 to 12:15 Eastern time, and the title of the panel is "What Happens in Between the Panels is Part of the Story," and that's Brian sharing the basics of sequential storytelling and his musings on what makes a good story. So yeah, if what we're talking about intrigues you, you're definitely going to want to watch tomorrow morning and check out the conversation then. So I just wanted to point that out, that we've got the full information on that. I'm scrolling right now. Let's see here. People agree. Pelicanos, great writer. Yep. Let's see. Which characters did you enjoy? This is Perry again. Which characters did you most enjoy writing? Were there any that you struggled with writing? And if so, how did you get over those hurdles?
I've always enjoyed writing Constantine. John Constantine. That's a character, when I go back to him, it's like, he's a comfortable pair of shoes. Writing Lex Luthor was easy. That was like writing my diary. I agree 100% with what Lex said. That was me talking.
It's funny, as we're having this conversation, Zack Snyder's Justice League just dropped on HBO Max, and I imagine our audience might be watching it as well. I felt that, and this is my own personal opinion regarding Luthor, it was kind of a misstep the way they treated him in both the Batman v Superman film, and again, I'm only an hour and a half into the Justice League Snyder cut right now. But it seemed to me, honestly, I was expecting more conversations with Luthor and Bruce Wayne that we got in your miniseries. And also while he very broadly points out the paranoia of this alien with these godlike powers, I was expecting a much more sober and coldly calculating kind of, how do you not recognize this threat that's out there? And I thought what we kind of got was an Adam West Batman villain take on Lex Luthor, where it was a little over the top, but that's my opinion. You haven't had a chance to watch the Snyder Cut yet?
No, I haven't seen any of it.
Any thoughts on the DC movies or the DC television?
I heard he was and I haven't seen it. I heard he was very close to what Lee and I did when Kevin Spacey played him.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, in the film Superman Returns, I think he was more.
In fact, I think there were lines that were taken out of the book.
That's interesting.
Yeah. That happens to me.
Well, hey man, and that's not right. And I mean, I hope you're able to get compensated when that happens.
Oh, what do you mean it's not right?
I'm hip.
It is. Listen, I don't. I have influences. If I'm an influence, okay, that's part of being part of a creative community. You put this stuff out there, and compensation is nice, but that kind of Okay. And I've been compensated for some of the films. Definitely.
All right, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, we kind of covered this, but I agree with what's I'll let you answer it again. What's the difference between, Cynthia is asking, what's the difference between putting on a character someone else created, or I guess writing a character someone else created, and how do you make them your own? And like you said, that's kind of what you're looking for, I think, when you approach these.
Yeah, I look for an angle that hasn't been explored before. I understand that, like, when I'm done with the character, I have to put him back in the box. And
Right. You can't break it. You can't break the character, and you've got to leave him in a state where someone else can pick it up and do something else with him.
Yeah.
I can appreciate that. Definitely, man. Are there,
but with my own
and I was going to ask, beyond 100 Bullets and some of the other Vertigo things, have there been DC Universe characters in the superhero world that you have created that others have used?
Yeah, I think so. I think some of the I think some of the characters from the Wonder Woman run went elsewhere. I know Strife has been in the Harley.
That's right.
The Harley
Yes.
cartoon.
That's cool. How's that feel when you see somebody else using your character? Is that a good feeling, or whatever?
Well,
Okay.
whatever.
Okay, because and honestly, by the same, in fact, there was a mild controversy when you guys were doing Before Watchmen because of Alan Moore's very specific, hey, this was our creation. We were promised that eventually the rights for Watchmen would revert back to myself and Dave Gibbons, the creators. We'd be able to do our own thing. And there really was this debate back and forth of, should there be Watchmen stories created by others? And while I absolutely respect and honor that feeling from a creator that, hey, I was promised this stuff, I also understand, and maybe this is me pussing out, but I will say that nobody expected Moby Dick, the equivalent of what Watchmen represented. It's on the 100 greatest books of the 20th century list by Time Magazine. And that's books. It's not comic books. I mean, it really is exceptional. And
right.
But the tradition of comics, right or wrong, has been Siegel and Schuster creating Superman, and then other generations writing and drawing the art, and the same thing goes with all the Marvel heroes as well. So, yeah, I don't know how you feel about, just that whole thing.
How do I feel about it? Don't sell your rights, and if you sell your rights, shut up. That's a little rough, but it's like, listen, you sold your rights. You know what you did.
Understood. And that's Macario is asking the same thing. How do you deal with copyrights and ownership issues and restrictions? So talk about that.
Well, it's like, all right, I know. I mean, I have to sign a contract. If I don't want to sign the contract, no one's forcing me to sign a contract. I do that. And when I sign a contract, I live up to
Is there room as the creator to go back and saying, well, I don't like it this way, but to renegotiate and get it to a level? I mean, is there enough wiggle room from the publishing standpoint? Okay. Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, I've done some wiggling a little bit with 100 Bullets, but it's only, they let you wiggle as much as they're comfortable.
No, and I get that. Absolutely. Well, and again, really for the people that are aspiring to do this, they should know really off the bat, hey, you're creating a Spider-Man villain. Marvel owns that. Sorry. Yeah, you created it, but again, depending on the level of whatever contract you wrote. And a lot of times, I know this in television, a great character will be created by one writer, and they'll see a similar, the viewers will see a similar character in a subsequent episode and be like, why didn't they use the original character? And it's like, because they'd have to pay that original writer because of the way the Writers Guild rules are set up, for example, in television. And, Star Trek is rife with those kinds of examples. And it's like, why didn't they just do X? And it's like, well, because they'd have to pay the writer that created X, in addition to the other writers that wrote that episode. And yeah, so I get it. Anyway, we can wrap up.
This is all the stuff. This is why I stay in my room. I don't want to deal with this.
Well, and perhaps maybe it's better to, again, create your own stuff and everything. And I'm glad you're at the point now where you're able to do that. What projects, as we wrap up, would you like to promote coming up?
Well, there's one that's going to be coming from DC this summer that I can't tell you what it is. And Eduardo and I are working on Moonshine. We're wrapping that up. I'm not sure if the first issue of the last arc has come out yet, but
Moonshine is set in the 20s. It's werewolves during Prohibition, basically.
Yeah, gangsters.
Go on, now. What else is coming up that you can talk about or not?
Yeah, that's there's some other irons in the fire, but nothing.
Okay.
Nothing
well, again, Brian is back here tomorrow at 11:15 with what happens in between the panels is part of the story. Brian talking about the basics of sequential storytelling and his musings on what makes a good story. So that's going to be great, and I encourage everyone to check that out as well. And as always, man, great conversation. I really appreciate where we went with this, and I hope everyone watching, tremendous questions. I hope you'll check out the Word Balloon YouTube channel and the podcast, because I have other great discussions with creatives just like Brian, and they're all sitting waiting for you at wordballoon.com and on YouTube on my Word Balloon channel there.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Likewise,
again, it's always good.
Well, this has been really fun, and the audience was great. You guys were great, and the audience was great. So much interaction between everyone. I really enjoyed that. I want to thank everybody for coming. I hope you've enjoyed this kickoff session for our 9th annual Kids Comic-Con. Our workshops begin tomorrow at 10 a.m. The doors will be open before that if you want to come in. If you get a little lost, go to the help desk. And we'll have workshops and panels from 10 to 4. Brian will be on 2 workshops, or 1 workshop and 1 panel. The workshop is at 11:15, and then the panel, Brian, you're in Careers in Comics, right? Yes, Careers in Comics in the afternoon.
Yes.
So check out the schedule. Lots of other cool things happening. Another awesome creator tomorrow night, Alison Bechdel, will be reading from one of her graphic novels. And there is a teen after party tomorrow night. So teens, you can wear your cosplay costumes, and you can play some collaborative drawing games and things like that. On the down low, there's also going to be a virtual over 18 after party for any adults who are watching who want to talk a little bit tomorrow after Alison Bechdel's talk. That's BYOB. So thank you all for coming. And thank you, John, so much. This has been really fun. And thank you to our interpreters who have also been awesome. And see you all tomorrow.